Okay, it being 6:30, I'll call the meeting of the Oregon School District Board of Education to order on Monday, May 14th, 2018. It's 6:30 p.m. We're at the Oregon High School Innovation Center. Ms. Wick, could you call the roll, please?
Ms. Feeney? Ms. Odorico? Ms. Flanagan?
Here.
Mr. Pankratz?
Present.
Mr. Kraus?
Yo.
Mr. LeBrun?
Here.
Mr. Zak?
Present. Board has a quorum. I have proof that the meeting has been appropriately noticed pursuant to Wisconsin Open Meetings Law. The agenda tonight consists of our normal consent calendar, communication from the public, some informational items including a short report from the Oregon Swim Club, and then some discussion items. One would be on the Dane County Youth Survey, and then another session on student growth, and then informational items report. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as posted. Mr. LeBrun with the motion, is there a second? Mr. Pankratz with the second. All in approval of approving the motion, or approving the agenda as posted, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, that motion carries. We have an agenda. Item A of the agenda is the consent calendar. Does any board member have any item they would like to remove from the consent calendar? Seeing none, I entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar. Ms. Flanagan with the motion, is there a second? Mr. Kraus with the second. Note number of donations. There's an anonymous donation of $1,100 for a personalized learning initiative, a $56 donation for the 4th grade musical, a donation from my wife for the splash pad. The band boosters have donated almost $18,000 for the Oregon band. And then we have donations from our administrators of $100 for administrative scholarship. Thank you, administration, for those. A donation of American Transmission Company of $375 for the RCI Arboretum, and a $180 donation from Chris and Amy Bintliff for Heritage Day guest speakers. We thank them for their support of the Oregon School District. Seeing that, Ms. Wick, would you call the roll, please, because we have staffing items.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes.
Mr. Kraus?
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Feeney?
Yes.
Ms. Odorico?
Yes.
Mr. Zak?
Yes, motion carries 7-0 to approve the items on the consent calendar. Item B of the agenda is communications from the public pursuant to Board Policy 18004. The board has established an opportunity for the community to address the board. Ms. Wick, has anybody registered with you? And this would not include the swim club. You guys are a separate item on that. Is there any member of the public who wishes to address the board at this time other than our folks from the swim club? Anybody want to address us? Seeing none, we will move on then to information items C1 and our OEA report. Is there any member from the OEA? Are we getting a report this night? Seeing none, we're on student report. Hi, Ellen. Thanks for coming, and I see Carolyn's here with us for hi. Welcome back.
All right.
Ellen, your report?
Yeah, not much. We have our last few weeks of school, so we have had AP testing last week and this week. And this past weekend we had prom. It was at the Inn on the Park in Madison. It's lots of fun. That's about all. Any questions or anything?
Anybody have any questions for Ellen? You're getting off easy tonight.
I guess
and you
so.
don't have AP testing like Caroline
I
does
don't,
today.
no.
Okay. Well, this might be your last meeting perhaps,
I know.
because we don't have a meeting on the 28th. We're trying to schedule a special meeting, and then the next meeting is after you graduate.
Yeah.
So we have really enjoyed having you as a member of our board. I think I speak from everybody on the board. What a delight you've been, and an informative board member. You worked really hard with us on the growth task force to give us the student input on the options are there, and we appreciate all the hard work that you have put into this, and hope you've learned a little bit.
I have. It was lots of fun. I
Yeah.
enjoyed it.
We tried to make it a little bit tolerable for you, but thanks much. Well, if you want to come up here, we have a little token of our appreciation. It's our Make a Difference Award that we give out. Yeah, you've got those fancy prom nails. Okay.
We'll put it in here.
Thanks. Ellen is going to the University of Wisconsin, and you're going to be studying biology? I was close. Elementary ed. And then Carolyn's going to the University of Minnesota this fall. Good luck to you guys. Report back to us. Let us know how you're doing. Okay. Okay. That takes us to item C3, Oregon Swim Club. And so we have three folks here from the swim club that we've asked to join us tonight. Maureen Bratz, Doug Sina, and Eric Knight. We get the mic on. And we had been hearing about issues related to the pool and available times and capacity stuff, and got a little bit of a flavor of that at some of our forums. And thank you for raising those at those forums, but letting us walk through our presentations. And we knew we wanted to bring you here to provide a little more information to the board about the issues that you see in terms of capacity at the pool. So the floor is yours. Do your presentation, and then we may have some questions for you at that. So,
I think before we start, you keep saying issues.
Yeah.
Yes, we look at it as a great opportunity for the school district, and I think we want to make sure that we address that, and hopefully our parents and stuff that have attended your forums were positive, and it's a lot of great opportunity for Oregon. And I guess with that, I just want to correct that, because that little word changes the whole discussion a little bit in my mind. So
Yeah, and I'm sorry about the wrong choice of words, because that your characterization of it has been what we've been receiving at the focus groups, and so that we wanted to make sure that we knew you had an opportunity to address that in full to the whole board. So if you would let us know what our opportunities are.
we will.
How's that? Go ahead, floor is yours. And we've got a mic there, so
Yeah,
that
thank
helps
you.
us
And
broadcast.
thank you for having us here tonight. My name is Maureen Bratz, and this is Doug Sina. We are both members of the Oregon Community Swim Club Board, and we are also parents of swimmers. I have two boys who are in high school, and we've been with the club for about 6 years, and Doug has two daughters. They're 10 and 6, so they're just getting started with their swim careers, and they've been with our club for about 3 years. And really, it's been over the last 2 to 3 years that we've really seen a crunch on space at the swimming pool. I don't know if everyone is aware of all of the programs that take place there. It's really tremendous that our community has such a strong interest in swimming. For instance, the pool offers swim lessons to kids just starting out. And from what we've heard from quite a few parents is that it's really hard to get into those because they're limited in how many of them that they can offer. And a lot of parents have to then leave Oregon and go to places like Swim West or Kittleson to get their young children introduced to swimming and some of those basic strokes, and for safety reasons. All of the gym classes go to the pool for swimming time, and that's really, not a lot of communities can offer that. But again, it puts a crunch on what other programs can be offered and how often the gym classes can go there. Then, of course, there is our swim club. We have really seen registration numbers go up, and we have actually had to cap our registration for the first time. We've had to do it, I think, since last fall. And it's encouraging that so many kids are interested in doing that. But it's just a matter of, the current pool is only 6 lanes. And there's adults that want to do swimming. There's all these other things. And we have really seen a crunch in what we can offer. And we've put a cap on registration, and unfortunately for these kids, sometimes they're swimming 12 to 15 kids per lane, which is, really something to see all those arms and legs going. But it's not always the best for the kids. They don't really get the full experience when it's like that. Obviously, our high school swim teams, and even those we've seen grow in numbers over the years. And from what we've been hearing from club members and from the our high school girls team next year could potentially be 30 swimmers. And I think Ellen and Caroline can speak to that too. Both of them. Well, have you been a swimmer? I know you've been the manager, but both of them have participated in those good programs. We have after-school programs that participate. We have adults doing just, recreational swimming for fitness. They have open swim. They have birthday parties. They offer water aerobics. They do Red Cross training for lifeguards and for safety training. They offer scuba lessons, if you can believe it. They have taught log rolling in the past there. And then we've also seen an interest in other high school athletic teams wanting to do cross training. I know last fall the cross country team would use the diving well to do some water running in order to save the joints of the students. So as you can see, a lot of stuff happening there, which is really great. But our current facility is pretty much busting at the seams. If you've ever looked at the schedule, it's really like a jigsaw puzzle. They try to squeeze in as many things as possible there. So what in January, we reached out to the local governing board for the swim clubs. It's called Wisconsin Swimming, because they offer help to communities to, create support for building new pools, helping them decide what type of facility to build, and then giving guidance on really, how to get the funding for it and get everything kind of organized. And we learned that communities our size typically have anywhere from 2 to 3 pool facilities in order to. And then in February we saw the report come out about the growth that you're expecting here, and we thought, boy, now is the time to really bring up this issue, because it's not going to get any better as far as the demand on the pool space and time. So, like I said, currently our current pool, it is only 6 lanes. It's a 25-meter pool, and it's a very warm pool, which is really more conducive to things like water aerobics or rehab, things like that. What we would like to see in this community is an 8 to 10 lane pool, a 25-yard pool, and what's known as a competition pool. Sometimes it's referred to as cold water, but it's not like it's a 50-degree pool. It's a little cooler, which is a little more conducive. And the thing is once you get more than one pool facility and you're able to offer more programs, you can increase the amount of revenue that you can generate to help support the maintenance costs, because we know they're not inexpensive to build, they're not inexpensive to maintain. But we can, like I said, my kids have been swimming, and we've been to swimming facilities around the state, and they kind of run the gamut. We've seen them where it's just, a standalone pool that's either attached to a high school or a middle school, depending upon the community. We have seen, then the far end of the range, this is the Recplex down in Pleasant Prairie, which has a hockey facility and a fitness and a clinic, and it's a indoor water park and a pool. It's really not, we're not looking to do that, don't worry. But because we're not the only, we realize we've been actually talking to other youth sports organizations. We've talked to the Parks Board. There's a lot of need for other facilities in this community, so there are possibilities to maybe partner with another youth sports group to build a multi-use facility, perhaps partner with a local healthcare facility so that then they can offer rehab facilities, maybe attach a fitness facility to it and have meeting rooms in there, make it kind of really a multi-use facility so that it's busy all the time and there's different people involved in it and things. So like I said, there's lots of possibilities. We've been kind of talking to a lot of people, and just are interested in finding out what we can do here in Oregon. So
well, I think Maureen's pretty much summarized everything, and that's good. And I today I was going together, put a lot of things together. Some visual. I'm not sure how handouts work, but I did bring some stuff just because we hope to educate everybody on Oregon Community Swim Club. I think that's an important thing to note. I can pass these out if you guys would like. And I just put a sample what the schedule last fall looked like. Now that was being said, and I don't know the exact numbers of the high school girls swim club, but typically the fall winters are our biggest season. Last year we were about 178 swimmers. Of that 178, we typically run about 80 to 85% of the kids are from the Oregon School District community. So I think we do have a lot of community. I think some of the benefits, and I'll speak to it with our younger children, I had no idea what swimming was. I was a football player, basketball player. That's what we did. But my wife said, hey, we can have free childcare or at the pool from 3 to 4. It gives us an extra hour to get back. So we have 35 8 and unders that I believe, that alleviates an issue that we also see in the district with some after school care. They're utilizing that. They're getting that good discipline. It's, those kids look forward to that, and I see it in the community in the pool when we start there. On the first 8.5 by 11, we just, here's kind of what we're looking at for the fall. We're looking at dropping from 178 last fall to probably limiting it down to 135 swimmers, unfortunately. That may not seem, our problem is right now we currently have 80% of our club members are under the age of 12. So they're sticking around still. We're not losing a lot at that 13 and over age when they start leaving the clubs. And we're retaining more of our 13 and overs. We're at about 30 swimmers that are 13 and over. Going down, you can kind of see what we've done as a club, because not everybody is in that competitive spirit. It's really important for our club and the board. We pushed it to maintain 2 tracks. We have that recreational track, we kind of call it, and then our competitive track. When you look at your Tiburones and Makos on the competitive track, those are your kids that are state qualifying, national qualifying times, that are traveling to meets throughout the nation for the club and representing. So Oregon's community, we took a team of 4 down to St. Petersburg, Florida in March during spring break, competed down there, and we had a lot of top 10 finishes out of our 4 swimmers. So the club is really growing. It's a growing sport. I think we're fortunate. As you'll see some of those resident numbers, we have some people traveling a pretty far distance. And I think a lot of that speaks to the coaching that we brought in with Coach Jim Lohmeyer about 3 years ago. But at the same time, Jim has a real strong focus on maintaining that recreational, the swimmers that want to show up 2-3 days a week, swim. And it's a lifelong sport. So, I guess, in our finishing, we think there's a lot of great opportunity here between the community, the school districts, the clubs that are in town, what the final product looks like. I know there's a couple areas, for instance, like along Alpine Parkway. I drive there, I see the school district land, I see the walking parks. To me that has a lot of opportunity for something unique that can help set aside our school district, our community. I would just say that, we have a big opportunity here. Cost of money is relatively cheap yet. We're still seeing good bid prices competitively for buildings. We have a significant growth. The growth you guys are seeing in the school, we're going to see that as well as swimmers go, swim clubs go. The communities around us, Stoughton, McFarland, Verona, are building pools. I want to stay, that we have community. It's a neat thing, especially small. We have teams that are successful. Look at the soccer teams that, we've had challenging state. You guys see it as school district members. It's something that I think to give those kids that opportunity, it's something they're going to remember for the rest of their lives. So I would just ask that, we seriously take a look and say, what can we do to make a difference? And, how can we impact that and instill some of those values? It's a lifelong sport. There's many uses for the community. Today I stopped in there at 11:30. There's about 45 seniors doing jazzercise. Took a picture on my phone because I'm like, nobody's going to believe this. Because I was like, I thought there was something going on at the elementary school. There's no parking. So I guess at that, I just ask you, really take the opportunity. If you have any questions, we'd be more than happy to answer them for you guys. And
Great.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks. Well, first of all, thank you for all you do for the youth of our district and area and the time you dedicate to the swim club. It's much appreciated. We have a lot of youth sports groups that rely on volunteer help, so thank you very much. Brian and I have been talking over the last week or so about this. We're going to take the information here and I are going to get together and kind of figure out how to utilize this information and the path forward for us to assess that. But, board members, do you have any questions right now of the folks? Okay, Krista.
Thank you for your presentation. You actually have 2 swimmers here on the board. Barb and I see each other at the pool at 5:30 in the morning. Just wondering if there's actually been a capacity study done, or if you've been working with Deb Bossingham. I would be very curious to see data in terms of, we've experienced increased numbers with lap swimming in the morning where you could swim. Now it's 2 to 3 people to a lane too. But I'm really interested in terms of, because I know Deb has had a hard time finding lifeguarding staff, which has impacted pool times. But is there hard data, or is there something that we've actually studied times and gotten specific data in terms of usage?
I don't know if Deb has actually done that or not. We have our attendance numbers from the swim club, but whether or not she has been tracking that data, I don't know.
Are those numbers the ones that you've given us tonight, or are they different?
So the numbers here are just our long course 2 season.
Sure.
So that's our lowest numbers. Historically, it's the summer, kids go swim for All City, the different swim clubs there, soccer, softball. You know, you have a lot of different things going on in summer. And some kids, just the parents, it just doesn't work out to get them there for those times. I do have a sheet of historical numbers showing our age groups and everything. We're seeing about a 20% increase every year.
And that's data that I think Brian and I will reach out to get from you.
Yeah,
Because I
and-
think we're going to work with Deb and you know, kind of look at our pool capacity and where we're at, given this information and other information we'll put together.
Well, and I think it's, you know, we definitely offer up our services. I know I was brought onto the board about 2 months ago just for the facilities operations of it. We're trying to get one voice, so if there's any outreach, I can definitely be contacted. And
We know where to reach you. In fact, you know, we said we wanted somebody to come and talk to the board about the opportunity that's there, and so we'll be in touch with you guys as we move through
Yeah.
looking at our pool capacity.
And I would invite anybody, if you want to visit during a swim practice or something, we can definitely see. I mean, it's a unique thing, especially, we just had a 6-year-old daughter who dove into the pool competitively for the first time on the weekend, and to see the faces of those kids when they come out of that pool and they get whatever, a heat winner, they think they won first place, that little ribbon, so.
Anybody else have any questions over here? We good? Good. Appreciate you taking the time and coming and informing us, and we will be in touch with you as we move through our study of it. Thank you
you.
very much. Takes us to item D on our agenda. We have no action items this evening. Discussion items E, committee reports, anything from policy? I don't think you've met, so vision steering, Courtney, I don't think you've met. We just organized last time, so we'll move now to item E2, which is the Dane County Youth Service. And Amy, I think that's you. Okay, come on up. And board members, you should have, I think at your desk, a copy of the Dane County Youth Survey, the 2018 Youth Survey Report, which is, we have done this for a number of years dating back to 2009 and before.
We actually gave you a color one knowing that this was short in time, but hopefully we'll go through a little bit more efficiently. So there's one copy for each with the color.
Go ahead, Amy, the floor is yours, and I think we've got the mic still on.
Perfect. So I am Amy Miller. I'm the Community Education Director and the Advanced Learning Coordinator for the district. I also support facilitation of the Dane County Youth Survey. And it is a survey that is offered to Dane County school districts every 3 years. We just completed the survey at our middle school and our high school in February and March of this year. Sitting to my right is the author and coordinator of the survey, Mr. Brian Koenig, and he's going to give you a little bit of an overview of the survey, and then we're going to kind of dive down into this information. All of this is Dane County Youth Survey information. We are actually the first district in the area to have any disseminated data like you have here, and we can thank Brian for that.
And Amy. I was saying earlier, I was at a meeting and she said, put us on the list first. So you can thank her. I'm Brian Koenig, and I'm the facilitator of the Dane County Youth Assessment. And what the Dane County Youth Assessment is, it's a youth risk behavior survey that has been developed and is developed locally. So 17 school districts participate. That's every school district in the county, plus Edgewood, and we even had Sauk Prairie involved this time, who has a few students in Dane County. Actually, I think Oregon has been involved since 1985, I believe. So and it started in 1980. So the beauty of it is that we were able to track data over a long period of time, and it's a community-developed project. United Way funds it, public health funds it, the county and every school district participates. So it's unique in that regard, and we have researchers all over the country using this data. We survey middle school kids, 7th and 8th grade, not 6th grade, and all high school kids at every district. The middle school survey is shorter and covers fewer topics. The high school one is a little bit longer. It's all done online, and every student is assured and reassured that this is confidential. We cannot track a student's name or the IP address or any of that. So it's confidentiality is critical to doing the survey. And I think when we were done this time, we probably surveyed 25,000 kids from the end of December to the end of February. So that's a little, did I miss any sort of background information? One of the things I just want to, okay, go ahead.
So in looking at what we live and breathe every day, the most interesting thing when I was reflecting on the survey data is all of the questions come from one of the points in the apple. And I think as we go through it, you will feel those. So this survey is an opportunity for us to better understand from a student voice some of the components here.
Yes. And I think the result of that is that we have so many players involved in the community who have interests in all of those areas. There's a couple documents that I'll just draw your attention to that we can kind of start digging into. One is the colored one that just got handed out, and then I think there's there's another one I have here that's a little a dig down into a little more detail. What this handout here is, we've been trying to refine a document that will not only show how you're changing, the Oregon School District is changing, but just kind of make some comparisons between to other school districts and see how things match up. And if you look at the first page here, it talks about drug and alcohol, and one of the things I think is important to point out, because and I should mention at the end we're happy to take questions and discuss this more, but a question that often comes up is, how do I know the kids are giving me the correct answers on these things? You know, how do we know that? There's a couple ways that we know that, in that we see kids taking this same survey on different days, in different months in some cases, giving us very similar kinds of answers to very similar questions. And in some cases, over a period of 25 years, we see trends, but nothing dramatic. If kids were lying, the answers would be all over the place. So we see very consistent responses, and as you look at this first chart, in many cases you'll see that the responses across different districts are very consistent. This may be something you want to take home and look at in more detail, so the numbers may overwhelm you a little bit, but there's first column is the YRBS for the state to the left. The next one is we look at suburban districts, which is Verona, Middleton, Sun Prairie, Edgewood, and Monona Grove. Then we look at suburban, which is where Oregon is, and you can see the list there. And then we look at rural schools. And then we have your data from 2009 to 2012 to 2015 coming from the other direction on the right-hand side. Does that make sense? And so you can see how a lot of things. One of the things you can see, rural school districts have different issues than some of, if you go from the larger urban school districts, there are different issues and some differences across the groupings. As far as Oregon goes, you can see that a lot of the alcohol stuff has been declining. Drank alcohol in the last 12 months has gone down since 2009, and if you could see it from 1985, it's gone down a lot. It's a chart that starts way up here and it's gone all the way down to here. So a lot more kids are drinking and driving and binge drinking and so on. So many of those numbers have gone down in the which would be the 9-year period from the first measurement. There's also some information on prescription drugs. The CRAFT measure on the bottom down there is an addiction scale that's used by therapists, and there's 7 or 8 questions, and if kids answer more than 3 positively, they're at a risk of addiction. So you can see all the way across all the districts, there's somewhere around 10 to 15% of kids who are at risk of addiction. So that's a little bit on the alcohol. Maybe we want to.
So one of the things with the alcohol and drugs in 2012, when we met after the survey, one of the things we as the educators as part of the survey said was, it's great, we understand that, but couldn't we ask questions as to why kids are not choosing to drink or use drugs? And for your information, the top 3 reasons as to why our high school kids are choosing not to use, so the 30% are using, which means we have a lot that aren't. One is impact to future. And when you think about all our conversations about goals, the new advisories, there's some real positives there. Bad for my health, which means they're really thinking about brain development, their own body, and the health of their body. And the third one is my parents would be disappointed. So those are really important to us as well as the negative trends.
I'm going to go through some other topics. I don't know. Sure. Okay.
So the parent connection trends, that's something we are always looking at because we want to make sure that as a family and community strong partnership, that's something that we look at as well in our communication goes back and forth. So we are consistent with Dane County Schools, which is positive. One of the things I'm just going to pass around for our 7th grade transition night this year, we had a brain under construction produced, and it was given to every 7th grade parent because one of the things we understand they need to understand is there's so much research out there today showing the changes in the brain through adolescence and the impact of alcohol, drugs, poor nutrition, lack of sleep. So we wanted a reminder they could take home.
I'm just going to segue to the next one just so we can keep going along. The next one talks about a question that we hear a lot about kids and phones and staying up at night and how much sleep are students getting. And I also do a lot of focus groups with kids. We've been working with some people from Boston College to talk with kids about sleep and how much they sleep. And one of the issues that most people are finding is that young people aren't sleeping enough, and that as adults we're not sleeping enough, and that's our kids don't sleep enough either. And so you can see here that we have up past 11, more than 2 nights a week. About 68% of the kids in the district are up 2 or more nights past 11. And middle schools, about 39%. We asked about phones. Do phones wake you up or interrupt your sleep? How often? And about 39% of the kids say interrupts their sleep at some time. Some said almost every night. Some said, well, occasionally. So we gave them a range of responses.
And that's a new question for this year. In 2015, we said, do you have a phone in your room? And the answer was yes, because they use it as an alarm. So this was an enhanced question for this year.
Right. So, and, you know, if you talk to kids, students, often there's some question about how much sleep does a student need or how much does a person need. And some of this is and this is uniform across a lot of districts. Evening meals with the family, that is about 70%, which is excellent, and across the county is very good here as well. One of the things that this data was used for was a study by Boston College, where they showed that evening meals with parents is a protective factor for a number of risk behaviors. And it was on the national news one night, or about a year and a half ago, talking about how important family meals are to helping students avoid alcohol and other risky behaviors. Okay, health and safety. Breakfast is something that in some ways for some districts has actually declined a little bit, but 2 or fewer days per week eating breakfast has kind of gone up a little bit. I don't know, and Amy and I were talking about that beforehand. We're not really sure what that means, and other districts are seeing the same thing. More students not having breakfast every day, and what's changing, we'll have to look at the data more, talk with other districts and see what they're doing, but that has gone up. More kids are saying they miss breakfast. Okay. It's all 7 days of the week. The meals. Yeah. So we don't, which is a good thought, because we could, the school day is busy. We could look at, separate out weekend and work a day too. But yeah, it is, we ask about all 7. The next page is one that, the topic that I've talked about a lot, because as we look at this data over a longer period of time, things change, but change very slowly. One of the more dramatic changes has been student anxiety. And we have a very good scale on this, on the survey over the last 3 years, and this time we expanded it a little bit. We not only asked more anxiety questions, but why kids were anxious. And as you can see from the numbers there, your numbers have gone up. If you look at other districts, their numbers have gone up to the point where some districts are at 40% of their kids are saying they're anxious often or always in the last 30 days. So what moves in parallel with that for some reason, and this is in the national data too, is suicide ideation. The numbers tend to move together. And that has, again, if you can see there, it's gone from 12%, 12 and 15% in past measures to 19 to 20. And as high as 25% in some of the rural schools. So this, and at middle school, it's 21. Actually, middle school in Oregon has gone down, which, we were talking about trying to figure out what's happening. But last time it was 31%, this time it was 21% of kids saying that they're anxious at the middle school level. When we ask kids about anxiety, the top 3 reasons are school. And we ask them an array of questions about home life, relationships with friends, too much work outside of school. But the top 3 are usually worry about too much work at school, worrying about college, and what is the third one? There's another one about school. So those are the top 3. And in focus groups, that's what kids will say as well. Now, of course, when we all talk about it, a lot of times the discussion goes to say, well, you wonder about anxiety because they're on their phone all the time, or because they're not sleeping, or we don't have drinks in here, but caffeine drinks over the last 3 measurements keep going up and up for high school kids. So are there silent forces that are creating the anxiety and it feels like school, or is there a lot to do in school, too much for them to do? I don't know. But their voiced concerns of choices of things that they can pick are school related.
I noticed in the middle school packet, the mental health issues, on page 11, where it gives the reasons for anxiety, I went through and added up the always and often columns, just because it seemed like that's where the concern was.
Sure.
And I was surprised to see at middle school that problems at home was the highest number, 67.7%, which really surprised me. And they have the social anxiety kind of thing, social pressure is right up there too, which is what I would have expected. But this score for problems at home was a surprise. And I don't know if high school, that drops back a little bit, of problems at home being...
It does. Problems at home is is number 4 above the 3 school-related ones. I think that it's too much homework, pressure to perform in school, and pressure to get into a good college are the 3 high school ones. And then problems at home, and then social pressure to be popular or look good. Those 2 are almost, the problems at home and the pressure, social pressure, often are very close within.
Do you have any ideas about why problems at home scores so high in middle school? Is it part of the transition to adolescence where there's just more tension?
You know, I don't know. I think that maybe the students are more aware of pressures at home, or they feel more connected to home than they do when they're in high school. I don't know. That's a good question. You wouldn't suppose that when they got in high school that there are fewer problems. You know, they would still have those problems. Definitely, there's data. There's 45 universities are participating in a study that asks very similar questions, and they've done it every year since the 2000, and they come with this very similar responses to this. Although financial issues move up, because you get the feeling in some of these that as you're younger you don't know that much about the financial issues, and when you get in college and you realize what the bills are, what your parents have to pay, it moves up. So that moves up. But in their study that they've been doing 2 years ago was the first time social issues wasn't the number one issue, and it dropped down below performance in school. Same numbers with anxiety. The other part of it is 60% of these kids are young women and girls, and the growth has been in young women and girls who have experienced this anxiety, report experiencing the anxiety more than boys. Right. Yes. Yep. Less sleep, and the stress at home as well. Right. And again, as Amy has said, I haven't looked at all the other data, but one of the things that's really a dramatic change is the amount of bullying reported, and we have a list of bullying questions that come at it very different ways in that chart under bullying and harassment. The top one is people reporting that they've been bullied or harassed. That's gone from 29% in 2012 down to 18%. And in most cases, I don't know that, maybe it's gone down in other districts, but that's a dramatic drop. There's racial and sexual orientation harassment. That's also gone down. Told someone to stop. That has decreased, and I think that's a good thing, because that means kids are probably seeing less. It doesn't mean that they stopped caring. It just means they haven't seen more to intervene in. And then connected with the next one, where it goes from 74% to 68% to 55% over a 6-year period. So that's and usually that's a good indicator. Kids are very willing. They might not feel like they got bullied, but they could see other people getting bullied or see some harassment happening of another person.
So it sounds like a good report on the bullying harassment, but the colors are yellow and red on there. What are the colors mean on these charts?
There are symbolism of we want to learn more. That's a number that, yes, in some ways is good, but 0 would be better. So it's still something we want to monitor, we want to watch, we want to support, because if kids are still seeing students bully other kids, then obviously it's something we need to address in a multifaceted way, from a curricular approach to a conversation approach to guidance being involved, PBIS, all the different ways that we can, just like we look at bullying from different angles, how can we support kids in different ways?
And I think on this particular chart, the yellow is the more dramatic change. Those are the big, clearly something that's different than it was last time. Yeah. And then on the other side, it slipped over on the other side of the page is a question we ask about students about staff put downs, and that too has decreased. And it just, again, all these are trying to come at different angles of, did you intervene in some bullying? Did you hear somebody else get bullied? Did you get bullied? Did you hear a teacher saying something? Just kind of at a larger picture. And then, I don't know if you want to jump in, or I can keep going here. Sexual behavior, sort of people who do a lot of this research sort of joke, because this keeps going down because kids never leave their room. They're just looking at their phone or playing video games. So that and alcohol could actually be related, because kids do not socialize as much as they did maybe 10 years ago. So this sexual activity has been flat to declining nationwide, and pretty much stayed the same here in this district too, maybe a little bit of an increase. Then the next one below, we ask questions about connections to school and how students feel connected to school. And as you can see there, most of the percentages were the same or up. And looking at how students feel about school, the one at the bottom there, I feel I belong at my school, is a little lower. And looks like that might be a little bit different. Also, the one in yellow, that we highlighted, and we talked about that a little bit as well. If you look at that line, I feel close to people at my school, or I feel teachers treat me fairly. Typically, when you ask those questions, those are the ones that are going to be the lowest. Those are going to get more of a response from kids that, I might not be being treated fairly, or I don't feel like I feel close to people. Those give you a little bit of balance to other questions where people might say, I feel safe at school. Although, given the last year or so, maybe fewer students feeling safe at school. I don't know. We didn't see too much of that here.
So the green also symbolized something that Brian shared with me. Those scores are the highest scores in Dane County. So when you talk about teachers and adults treat kids fairly, it's highest at the middle school and it's highest at the high school. The middle school number is 70%. Adults I can talk to, highest at the high school with 80, highest at the middle school with 84, and so on. So those green numbers mean something. When you correlate it with the students that report high anxiety, their numbers actually make up the difference. So anxiety and connection to school, if you have a highly anxious student, they report the rules and expectations are not clearly explained. I don't feel close to people in my school. I don't feel safe in my school. And this would be they're strongly disagreeing or disagreeing to these. Don't feel I belong, don't feel they're adults they can talk to, and don't feel teachers and others treat me fairly. So we can see in the drill down data, the students that report high anxiety are the ones who are saying that these connections are challenging. So that's good for us, early information that we can use to kind of develop some additional supports.
And from the puzzle is, which is the chicken and which is the egg, or where did it start, and do kids start by feeling disconnected, or if I'm feeling anxious about my future and am I going to get into a college or whatever? There's a lot of research that shows when I feel anxious, I feel threatened as well. I might feel like more likely that I don't connect with other people, or that anxiety brings on other. So we don't know that, and I think there's some. If you want to read a researcher who's looked into this quite a bit, Sharon Tweng, Tweng, at San Diego State University. She's published a couple of books. She kind of points at social media and phones. I don't know if I entirely agree with that, but she has a lot of great data. Last page is about we try to get at some of the homework stress and seeing that in most cases in most districts we're looking at 40 to 45% of the students say they struggle getting their homework done, and this is the first time we've done it twice. Looks like here it's gone down. Other districts I've looked at have gone up, but stayed relatively the same. And then we ask kids why they struggle with their homework, and you can see some of the responses there below. This is the first time we've asked those. And in many cases, your percentages are similar to other districts. A couple cases like too much homework is a little higher than the rural districts, but about the same as the suburban and urban suburban schools. So this is a lot to digest, and this is just a few pieces of all the data we collect, or you helped us collect. And this may take some going over to understand.
Oh, and the one other piece that is not included that the administrators at RCI middle school and high school would be talking about is, if you've heard the term juuling, it's a vaping, it's an e-cigarette, and the most interesting part of the survey this year was when we were meeting as a group, mid-survey, Brian added the term juuling to the survey, because if you ask a kid if they're vaping or student, they will say no. They use, it's like Kleenex, that's the brand name Juuling. And our reports, even at the middle school in February, 39 kids reported Juuling, which is an introduction to nicotine. So that's something that this information is going to help us, but we know it is growing, and it's something we need to deal with as a county.
I didn't see anything about nicotine use on this summary.
True.
Right. We have a lot of data about smoke. Well, tobacco use, I think it was 3 years ago for the first time, marijuana use nationally by high school age kids passed tobacco, smoking cigarettes and smoking tobacco. Marijuana was higher and tobacco was lower. But now with the introduction of the vaping and other things, those numbers have been coming up. And particularly at middle school, we're seeing more numbers increasing. Regular smoking of cigarettes, I think, went down again this time around.
Amy, could you get us those numbers, the summary numbers?
Yep.
On the vaping and nicotine use? Thanks.
I don't think kids think it's smoking. I think they think it's another thing. I mean, we've scared or wised them to tobacco use, but they think this is a different thing.
Did you ask any questions on opiate usage and heroin?
Yes.
Can we get that data at some point? What did you see?
You know, those numbers tend to be fairly 2 to 4% in any one district, particularly heroin. And it's most, it doesn't grow dramatically, but if your district is growing, you're going to see more kids because the percentage stays the same or maybe bumps up a little. So no dramatic growth. We do ask more questions about kids' access to opioids and how many opioids are in the home. And it's surprising the access kids have to prescription medicine. I was surprised about it. Maybe others wouldn't be. By far, a majority have easy access to their parents' prescriptions in their home.
So with the question on our first page of this, where it passes, medication last, is that almost all opiates, or is that, are there other prescription medications that are?
That's a good question. They could be. I'm not an expert on that. I don't know. I mean, they could be thinking about other kinds of drugs. We don't itemize them out. So I don't know. Well, no, we do break out speed and meth, or meth is and
that would
speed.
be non-prescription.
No, we don't ask about Ritalin per se. Well, it could be, but it would be part of the prescription, right? Yeah, we don't ask about Ritalin. So it could be part of the prescription. Absolutely, my college kids have talked about that. That kids get a prescription, then they take a quarter of it and sell the rest.
Amy, is that your formal presentation? Because if it is, we can open it up for questions at this point. Good. That was really good. Anybody have any questions over here? Krista? We'll kind of walk down Krista, Tim, and then Barb.
I guess just an overall question, too. What should we, as you look at this data, what in the Oregon School District should we be most concerned about? And what, I guess the other end of that is, what do you think we can impact most effectively, given this?
Well, the categories are designed to help us to look at the different categories, and typically from 2015, we actually looked at each and every category, drilled down, and tried to disseminate that information with people that would benefit from understanding the information, including students. From an alcohol and drug use, the clubs at the high school, including Keys, we look at data saying this many are using. They actually flip it and do what's called social norming to try to educate other students as to how many are not using. The texting and driving, the marijuana use and driving, and any DUIs. That information came from here, and there's actually things being done at the high school to educate students. From a parenting, which I participate in many parenting classes and facilitate them, much of the information we can use. Cynthia uses a lot of it in her parent resource newsletters. So topics that come from here in terms of sleep, brain development, how you get around having a phone in the room at night, all of those pieces. How to host a party and make sure you're making good contact to make sure things are safe. Our Phy-Ed teachers, our health teachers get all the health data, and we talk about different ways to impact. We've looked at curriculums based on what we see. The social emotional curriculum that is through Student Services Second Step was a data-driven decision using our AODA grant funds. All the emotional health goes back to Leslie, and this is kind of crunched through at the mental health mental health committee, to try to determine what we know, what we need to know, and what we can do in terms of tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 interventions. And the school success, that is a new data point we've never seen before, and that's something that I know when Dr. Bergstrom looked at, it was, what is this telling us about students and student success? And if anxiety, the correlation is the homework, what do we need to find out, and then where do we want to go with that? Because obviously we want kids to be successful, and we don't want homework interfering with that success. And the reporting here tells us a little bit that it might be. Does that answer your question?
I think if I just pull back and look at it, and I don't know the school district, and not connected to it by people, just by data, and I look at what the colleges are seeing in their data, because they're asking all kinds of risk things too. The anxiety and depression and suicide ideation is an issue that I don't know how, I don't think anybody right now knows how to deal with that, but I think it should, I would hope that it's on everybody's agenda, and trying to, from the parents to community organizations, to say what culturally is going on right now to cause that to change. Because just, if anything, just because the numbers have changed more than any particular thing on the whole surveys as we've been doing it, at least in this, in 2000s.
Krista, one other thing that we try to do is take this data and drill down to subpopulations and really learn from those subpopulations where trends are headed, and then again try to determine what we can do to support positive change.
I think it's very interesting to me to hear, kind of the chicken egg argument in terms of high anxiety kids
Don't feel like there's expectation, or the expectations are not clear, and that, so that's one of those concepts where, what is it? Thanks.
Tim, anything?
Without question, we're seeing some new things enter into the picture. From the middle schoolers' perspective, could you talk about 2 or 3 things where they're becoming early indicators of this whole issue around juuling? Everything seems to be sliding down the scale towards a younger and younger experience with some of these things, and juuling is a great example of that. Are there any other early indicators that are sliding down into the middle school ages that we can be particularly vigilant about?
Well, I think that, looking again at the emotional health stuff, I think some of the, Amy's pointing at one here, problems in the larger society and problems in the world came up very high for middle school kids, which as we go along, would be interested to see if that continues, or, if that's something that, that seems just, anecdotally seems unusual. And
They have access to these.
Right. And you wonder, for any of us, there was the New York Times on Sunday who talked about anxiety among adults across the country. Are we just never away from it? And that, it's sort of the water we swim into, we don't even know that it's happening. A lot of the drug and alcohol things tend to stay, most of the districts are flat to declining. The juuling is new. Physical exercise, we didn't talk about a lot, but there's something pretty dramatic in high school. You have a lot of kids exercising as freshmen, We ask them just about exercise in general, and then it drops way. By the time you're seniors, it's only the high sport kids that are exercising. I mean, not only, but primarily, and there's a whole group of kids that drop way off and they're not exercising anymore. And 8th grade, you have the same phenomenon that you do at 9th grade. You have a lot of kids participating in things and more activity and exercise. So it's not a negative. There's actually a very positive thing there that declines through high school primarily.
I think the other on the positive note is, as Brian reported, that the emotional health indicators for the middle school have actually dropped. So for me, that's a positive, because if we can help them maintain their current level of health, then as they move forward, if they've built some self-regulation skills, some mindfulness skills, some ways to deal with anxiety as it approaches, I see that as a positive. So we don't just look at what are the negative that are starting, but what do we see that we've maybe made an impact on? We won't know for sure, but we're seeing positive trends. And then how do we keep that trend moving?
Because those are a couple of things that we've introduced just over the last 2 or 3 years, probably longer than that, just that I've been aware of, that we've introduced in the middle school. And I guess we won't really see what that looks like for the next 2 or 3 years as they go through high school. All right, thank you.
Barb, anything?
I guess one of the things that just ran through my mind is, are you aware that doctors, when they see their teenage patients, are having any conversations with students or with parents about things like sleep and exposure to opioids, the things that parents can have a little bit of control over, devices in the bedroom at night? Do you know if any of those conversations happen with physicians?
Actually, there's going to be one tomorrow. So Cynthia DiCamelli and I, are in partnership with Oregon Cares, which is a community coalition, reached out to our 2 clinics in Oregon, UW Health and Dean. And one of the things we wanted to do was create that collaboration of information of what things have changed in school and what would be beneficial. So we have had presentations. Drew Lakuta has gone to actually both UW Health Dean here and UW Health in Fitchburg, asked him to come, on teen and the AOD use and the teen brain. Dr. Bergstrom and a counselor from Rome Corners, Colleen Schell, have spoken about mental health and really focusing on all the supports that are available both in the school through our own staff plus other staff coming in, and trying to really create a bridge of communication to make sure those questions are being asked. Because one of the things we heard from the physicians themselves and their staff is they didn't know what to do. So having Dr. Bergstrom come and explain, these are things that are offered, and if you have a parent or a teen, please give them this information or reach out to us. And having them be able to sign paperwork that allows us to communicate quickly is another factor. But I also shared 2015 data. So we've talked about many of the key points, information about sleep, brain development, nutrition. Actually, every clinic member of both clinics has our green Healthy Active Kids Learn Better shirts, and they wear them there too, because one of the things we talked about to them is if parents and kids are moving about the community and they're getting a consistent message. So that's another piece that we're working on in collaboration with them.
That sounds great. One other thing, and this is more of a comment, I'm not actually exactly asking a question, but one of the things, the homework questions and the anxiety around homework is, to me it's a huge concern. And it seems like one of the things that might be happening is that homework is starting to crowd out exercise as kids get older, or basically other activities that can help relieve anxiety. I mean, to me, exercise is the magic elixir, and I hate to see kids starting to substitute homework, and which comes with this set of anxieties for other activities. And I would really like to see us, the district, looking more closely at homework, how much is appropriate. And one of the things that you hear sometime from kids is, I have this and this and this, and it's all due this week. And I'm just wondering if there's any opportunities to coordinate the burden, the homework burden across subject areas, so kids aren't feeling a lot of anxiety because just randomly certain kinds of things are crashing down on them at the same time. It's not always random. If it's exams, that's one thing, but just, sort of if there's an opportunity to coordinate across subject areas to help kind of spread the homework load.
Thank you for sharing that.
Courtney?
Two things. One is this is just a comment, I would agree that to me the biggest red flag was the anxiety, suicide ideation. I had circled both of those as trending up, and certainly been reading about it on a national scale. And I do believe that we've talked about it a little bit in terms of mental health concerns district-wide. So I think those two things dovetail and will be worthy of future discussion. My question is, the other thing that really stuck out to me was on page 1, the 50% of students have seen other students using drugs or alcohol at school. Is that 50% of kids that were queried about that? So half our kids have seen somebody using drugs or alcohol at school. So that's a bit concerning, particularly when you compare it to other suburban districts, and I mean even more than rural districts. Did you drill down any more with that question? Do we have any more information about that that might be helpful in tackling that as a problem?
I haven't yet, and I think we could look at, who are those students that. The biggest thing we do is look at who are the students that saw, the drug and alcohol use at school.
We didn't ask where they saw it, what time of day they saw it, before school, during school, after school.
And it's a tricky question. We used to have one, and I don't want to minimize, this is an important question, but we used to have one about fighting. Had you seen a fight at school? Well, there was some research that started to show 2 fights, and if everybody saw it, then you could get the idea. It was a loud fight.
Got it.
And a lot of people saw it. So this doesn't mean that. It's important to see, that they're seeing. Maybe the students who are using drugs and alcohol are prominent for some reason, or what. There's 2 sides.
Well, would it imply that it's something that they saw as opposed to they heard about? Because with a drug deal, for example, I could see 1 or 2 people maybe saw it, but then it gets spread around as a rumor, and then suddenly half the school says, oh yeah, there's kids doing drugs at school.
It could be. It's a question that's among a whole set of questions. Have you seen? Have you seen? Mm-hmm. The heading says the following question is about things you've seen at school. So mm-hmm. It could be, and it could be just anybody's mind that maybe it's such common knowledge to you that you feel like you saw it as well. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's one question on the subject. So you're getting a rough idea. But
right. I guess part of the reason I bring it up, and I know you're all going to be mad at me, but we've talked about drug dogs at school, and we've talked about having data to help us form decision making on that. And that is one small piece. Are there other pieces from this survey that can help us in forming, a good decision around the idea of bringing drug dogs into school? I guess that's why that caught my eye in particular.
Thought I have, just knowing the prevalence of vaping, and again, this is students interpreting the question, and we know that vaping has been prevalent, and students knew about what it was long before we as the adults did. So that could be influencing, but
Sure.
you would be able to drill down a little more.
Would you also interpret this as being after school activities, i.e. football games on Friday night, potentially?
Could be, and it could be as kids are leaving school, in the parking lot. Or,
The question is at school.
Right. So I guess that the last question I would leave you with is it worth developing that line of questioning more to get better data to help understand if kids are using drugs in school, or if they're drinking in school, or if it's after school, or
Sure.
maybe, I don't know. Yeah.
You talked about the decrease in bullying and the data that was shown with that, and then you also talked about the increase with phone use. So I'm wondering, did the questions get to the point of, are students bullying differently now with technology, instead of the conventional bullying that we
That's
used to perceive?
Good question, and actually, that question did not get in this table, but we can get it to you. There are questions about being bullied over the internet or via texting, and those percentages have gone up. I don't know your data in this district exactly. The physical, verbal bullying is more likely to be boys. The text, phone, internet bullying is more likely to. The growth in that has been with girls. So yes, there's been an increase in that, and I don't know where you're at exactly with that, but we can get that.
Thank you.
Brian, thanks for coming today to Oregon, and thanks always, Amy, for the great work you do for us here.
Thanks for the brownie.
Oh, sure. Take a couple with you. A couple of things that I was thinking here and wondering whether you can answer is some of these things that seem to be trending, especially, well, in a good way, like the bullying and harassment seem to me to be trending significantly and consistently in a good direction. Does that seem to be a part of a national trend? Is it a trend throughout Wisconsin? Is it something that we in our district are doing and having an impact over? I know there's been a lot of talk about bullying in the last 5, maybe almost 10 years, and it's been in the news and probably on popular media, TV shows, etc. Any idea whether we're beating the trend, we're bucking the trend, or whether we're just, our school is tracking along with a general decrease in bullying?
It would be it'll be interesting to look at everybody's data and all laid out this year or this time, but generally the trend has not been decreasing. That the trend has been flat to some cases increasing. So in spite of all the good work, and a lot of it's been the addition of electronic bullying, the other kinds of bullying. So really it has not been going down. Maybe somehow this year, around the country it went down, I don't know, but it's been up or flat to unchanging. So these, I would say personally, these are interesting that they've gone down. And I would say that these are probably, particularly the 18% there, although we see with some of the urban schools have also been working on it. They have a lot of programs, urban, suburban schools. In most cases, I would say this is, I would say, unusual trend, but different than other districts. And it's been different than what it has been in the past. Particularly the saw other students bullying other students, which is usually pretty high, although it's gone down a little bit with the other districts too. So I would say no, the trend hasn't been to this point that it's going down.
Another thing that I had going in my head is, do a lot of these things, specifically the emotional health that I'm looking at, have to do with socioeconomic status? Can we look at the correlation between the numbers for the districts who have higher socioeconomic status? Does that reduce stress, or are there other factors in there, or is it school programming, or other things that may affect it? But I thought socioeconomic status in that would be an interesting correlation if that were the case.
The folks at Boston College who came and talked to kids at 3 high schools did not find a lot of socioeconomic differences. If anything, it was more stress in the higher socioeconomic, not the lower. So and that's kind of what they were looking at. They saw a pattern in districts that had higher income and had more stress, particularly among girls. Even grades, we ask about grades, there isn't a real strong connection between kids with higher grades and lower grades and more anxiety necessarily. Maybe Amy's got more data, but the most powerful connection is female, male, dramatic. And as it changes, it becomes more like 65 to 68% are girls and 32% are boys. So we haven't found that necessarily, but it could be hidden somewhere. You're just not looking at it the right way.
I do have data from 2015 where we did drill down, and in the past 30 days, how often have you felt anxious or on edge? The universal was 30%. Self-identified free and reduced was 47%. Self-identified IEP was 50%. Self-identified non-white was 40%. And self-identified transgender was 80%. So, and we're seeing that pattern through all of those questions in those subpopulations. I have not taken the time yet, nor have you, to drill down in the 2018, but that was our trending in 2015.
So if I get that right, the 15 said free and reduced lunch recipients were more anxious than the general population.
All categories were more anxious. So free and reduced, self-identified IEP, non-white, and transgender.
Right.
Right. But that partly those are small groups though also.
Yes.
So we have a lot of anxious people, and a small piece of them are those students, and it does make sense that they would feel more anxiety. But if you lined up all the anxious kids, they would be a smaller segment of them just because they're a smaller segment of the school. The majority of those kids are other kids involved in other things. They don't have an IEP, and they are not on free and reduced lunch. So that doesn't describe the whole group, but it describes a part of the group.
I also wanted to, Courtney had a good idea there, which is not uncommon, that these numbers could help us to figure out whether the drug dogs are having an effect. And at least the one that she had identified, and I couldn't think of a better one in this survey, at least the summary that we've got, seen other students using drugs or alcohol at school is up since we've been doing the drug dog test for 2 years now, where drug dogs are allowed in the schools where they haven't been generally to do a general sniff. It might indicate that it hasn't had an effect on at least that particular thing. So yeah, I'd be interested if you, Amy, especially if you had any time, which I know you're very busy, to think of other areas where this could correlate, that could help us decide whether there is any effect on the last 2 years of using random drug sniffs. Would grade. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Brian and Amy. As usual, this is a really interesting snapshot into our district. One thing that I take away from looking at the macro data across districts is we're not very much different than Dane County, whether we look at it from rural to suburban or urban suburban. Especially if you're using a 0.05 statistical significance factor, I think most of these were not statistically significant than other districts. So we're seeing a societal trend, I think, is what we're seeing. Although we spent a lot of time starting 5-8 years ago talking about bullying and harassment, and spent a lot of time talking about developing a culture that doesn't tolerate that. And I think, I guess my takeaway without looking at the disaggregated data is that that's paying off. we're creating a culture that doesn't tolerate that, or at least is trending towards that. As long as we're talking about the 50% seeing other students using drugs or alcohol at school, I guess a question that I would have is, we ask a question, did you tell someone to stop it, the harassing behavior? And I guess my question would be, if we're really trying to create a culture that doesn't tolerate harassment and bullying, and we really want to create a culture where our buildings are drug and alcohol free, the next question is, did you tell anybody about it? And if not, why not? I mean, we can talk about various reasons, various different ways to drive that number down. We found a real effective way to do it with bullying and harassment, and that's creating a culture that doesn't permit it amongst students. So finding that data would be important to me. The other thing is I really liked, I forgot the word you had, but it's flipping the numbers. We're looking at the bad numbers, and by and large, they're numbers that are pretty low percentage-wise. If you flipped them and you cast this report saying that, you know what, really, over 80% of our kids don't binge drink. 85% of our kids don't have addiction stuff. Okay, what are the positive things that have been driving that? Because we're doing so many good things in this district, educationally, to keep that number where it is. That's not to discount the number, but we tend to focus on the negatives a lot and worry about that, and sometimes at the risk of not identifying the things that are keeping the number of positive things in place. So it's a matter of perspective from me. Finally, the one area that I think we all focus on, and we've been talking about this as a board, and particularly with Dane County and Joe Parisi's initiative with mental health, is those numbers are at a level that we're paying attention to. And as a board, Amy, we'll need you to, as you look at the 200, and Brian, as you look at the 2018 numbers and disaggregate them, if you could find correlations in there that look at ways that we as a district can address that, and particularly items that we as a board would need to be aware of as we're walking through budget season and looking at things. I know you're working with the administrative team on those issues, but I haven't had a chance to go through this in a lot of detail, and you guys know this data more. I think if you could bring that sort of disaggregation and correlation data in terms of that mental health aspect, I think this board would find that important. Okay. That drive anybody else to speak?
Yeah.
Well, it's right for us to focus on where we can fix, but we shouldn't ignore the things that are driving the really big percentage. And, we're really doing well on a lot of stuff. And just the fact that in the bullying and harassment area, we're making really significant strides in creating a culture that's positive. And so if there are other areas, we need to do that. Anxiety, okay. There's some correlations there. What can we do as a district? What can we do in terms of educators that would eliminate anxiety? I talked to Chris and I had coffee today. I remember running by the high school this morning saying, oh my God, it's 3 weeks to exam. And I remembered just dreading the last 3 weeks of school. And that shouldn't be. We're a learning education institution. Our kids shouldn't be dreading the last 3 weeks of school. They should be celebrating it. So that should inform us. Thanks so much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
All right. Cheney, you are wrong. We had our time. This is going to be a good session. We're going to a work session on student growth. And we've got 3 things here. One is to get a summary of our focus groups, get that information, because that's been a significant feedback piece for us as a board to drive our decision making. Brian's got some other information, and then board discussion. One thing, if you're comfortable, if we're comfortable talking about driving to an option tonight, or at least narrowing them if we have a comfort level and getting some work done, we can do that. If you're not, we're planning on another session, but I don't know where everybody is at in terms of thinking on that. So just keep in mind that when we get the information stuff to us, at the end of that, I'm going to kind of prod to see where we're at, okay? To see how much time we need, whether it's one meeting or more meetings. Okay, Erica, I think you're going to do the presentation on our focus groups. Okay, and we had a lot of administrators take a lot of their time out of their schedules to be present at these focus groups. Thank you, everyone who was there from the administrative team, to meet with our public. Know that it's really appreciated. I know when we had our other referendums, the presence of our administrative team with our public to get information was one of the keys to the success of those referendums. Erica, the floor is yours.
So this presentation is really meant to just be an overview of the detailed report that you already have. So oh, is it not on? It says it's on. Is it not close enough? Oh, there. Okay. So I'm just going to walk through the themes of the report, and then if you have questions, we can certainly go through that. And if anyone, like Steve mentioned, there were a lot of others who joined the group, so if anyone else has thoughts, pop in. So overall, the reason we did focus groups was to share information about the growth that we're seeing in the district, and then also we wanted to hear people and listen to their feedback. You know, what do they think when they hear this information? And then we wanted to give people a chance to ask questions. So what we did is we had focus groups that were open to the community, and we did our best to get the word out about the groups. We had some ads in the paper with the times of the groups. We sent both in the Oregon Observer and in the Fitchburg Star. We sent postcards to every home, every residence within the Oregon School District to tell the times. And then we also certainly used the tools that we have in the district. So we sent emails to families letting them know. Emails to families, website, Facebook, that sort of thing. And when people came to the focus groups, what we did is we had a brief presentation just to orient people, because these are complex topics and we wanted to make sure everyone was on the same page with what we were talking about. And then we had displays set up around the room, and one of them is the one that I put down here. We had different stations. The idea was to get people to be able to go and ask their questions. And we heard that many people said that this approach worked really, really well, because it gave them the opportunity to interact in a smaller setting. And then before everyone left, we asked them to fill out a feedback worksheet. And so that is also in the packet that you have. But in that worksheet, there was a ranking task, so they ranked the factors as high, medium, or low that you have all been talking about and considering as you sift and winnow through these different options. And then there was a space for open-ended feedback. And all of that feedback is in the packet that you have. Just really briefly, this is a list of the participants at the different sessions that we had, and our goal was to try to get as many people, so we had different days and times, different times of the day. And then if people weren't able to come, they had an open invitation to contact Dr. Bussler to set up individual or small group sessions. So in total, we had 78 people who gave feedback through this process in some way. The one number that's not in your packet is that we will be adding, but we had a group on Saturday that wasn't in the packet as the time we printed them off. So there were 10 additional people. But as I look through the feedback, the themes have not changed. They are still consistent with what you see in the packet. So moving on to the themes. So the way I've chosen to do this is give the big theme. There's some exemplar quotes, and again, every quote is in your packet. I'm not going to read through the quotes, but just briefly go through the themes, and then you can ask questions. So one thing that was consistent across groups is that people were really, when they understood the growth that they were facing, they were supportive of the efforts that we're going through to plan for the future. But what was really important to them is that we do so in a way that preserves the values that we have in the district, that we came together with the community to create. And when we talked about what those things were, we heard things like class sizes. We want the class size and school sizes to remain smaller, like we have today. Relationships with students came up, and these two things go hand in hand. It was important that teachers and staff build strong relationships with students, and that we know our students. And then, of course, the high quality education. These are all things that we heard over and over again, that it's important to preserve those values. That's not to say that there weren't some differing opinions. I would not say it was the theme or the trend or the majority, but there were a handful of comments we heard that, gosh, we're growing really fast, and that's kind of scary. And I moved to this community because it's a small community, so a little bit of that. And then what is the impact? What's the impact going to be as we grow? Another theme you already heard about a little bit tonight, and it's that when people really started thinking about the growth and looking at the numbers and thinking about what it means, in addition to thinking about the classroom, what does it mean for our community and other topics? So you heard about the pool tonight. That was one of them that came up frequently. But in addition, childcare. People wrote on their sheets and spoke with a number of us directly, and spoke with us about, gosh, right now I feel like our child care centers are at capacity and there are long waiting lists. So what does that mean? And what can we do as a district potentially to help with that? And then a few comments came up about bike paths. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to connect the community, the way the communities are growing? Wouldn't it be nice to connect the communities in terms of outdoor bike path areas? Those who, one of the boards that we have that is down here at the focus group, the display boards, had to do with the different options being considered, and we had the 4 different options on the table right now. And on this board, they're labeled A, B, C, D, and they correspond with 1B, 2, 3, and 4 in the packet. But since we had removed some, that's how we decided to talk about them in the groups. But those who talked about which option they prefer seem to like the ones C and D most, that created a K-5 elementary schools and kept a smaller middle school. And I should say a number of people didn't express which preference they wanted. They thought, gosh, this is a lot of information, and were really interested to see the options, but didn't necessarily tell us. But those who did, many seemed to favor options C and D. However, there were a handful who spoke with us and wrote on their feedback forms that, gosh, I really like what we have now, and it's kind of hard to envision change, and I'll be sad to see that go. There were also a handful of folks who were either currently open enrolled within the district, or who would like to open enroll. And it wasn't a lot, and only one person wrote a comment, but enough of them spoke with us that I thought it was something important to call out, just about open enrollment and just questions about what does that mean? If my child goes here now, are they going to still be able to open enroll here? Or, gosh, I'd really like to be a part of this district, and at this, I don't know if that'll be a possibility in the future. And then the final theme, again, that we heard over and over, and I think it's a testament to the way the school district has worked with the community in the past, is that we really appreciated the opportunity to come and learn about the growth, and and give their feedback. And they were just so pleased that, gosh, we're really ahead of this. We're a couple years out, and they were pleased that we are planning ahead and being proactive. One additional thing that I will be adding to the full detailed report is not necessarily something that nobody wrote it on their sheets, in fact, but it's an observation that we made, and it has to do with the geography of the district. And one of the display boards we had showed the map of the school district, and many people, it came up in pretty much every group, were not aware that our district, the geography of our district, they were not aware that we go almost up to the Beltline. They're aware of Brooklyn because we have a school there, but the other direction, many people weren't sure about. And then as they looked at it, they said, well, is that Fitchburg? Is that going to Fitchburg? And it said, well, yeah, yes, it does. And so, not necessarily good or bad, just questions like, well, does Fitchburg have a school district? Just curious. That's not something that many people knew. And it brought up some interesting and good discussions about, well, gosh, how are school district boundaries created? And so there was some good dialogue about that. And again, I wouldn't categorize it as good or bad, just, people just didn't know. Not common knowledge. So those were the overall themes that we heard and looked at through open-ended feed comments. There was also a ranking task, and there is a chart for this in your packet. But if I were to summarize what the ranking was, so just real quick, people were able to rank high, medium, or low for each of those factors that we have been discussing. My overall takeaway is that everything's important. I mean, when you look, right? When you look across, low wasn't something that most people wrote. Didn't get a lot of votes. But the ones that ranked the highest were ones that had to do with flexibility and, again, like the theme, preserving the values that are important. So flexibility to accommodate growth over time, similar school sizes, and similar experiences tended to be the ones that people ranked as being very important or highest importance. Other ones like schools close to students and financial impact, those were also really important, but they just weren't ranked in the high category quite as much. And there was an interesting quote that I want to call out, especially with the one for schools close to students. And it is this. The reason I ranked proximity so low is just anecdotally. It appears very few kids actually walk to school. I just don't see that as a determining factor, but all things being equal, of course, a neighborhood school is preferable. So in that person's, I think that was a nice way to summarize it, because in that person's experience, they don't see, they see kids riding buses or getting driven to school. So that's their frame at this point. And then if there's one that didn't get as many high rankings, it was efficient traffic patterns around school. So, yeah. So that's the summary. What questions do you have?
Any questions? I'll start over here. Courtney, anything?
No, not right now.
Troy? Dan?
I noticed that there were a couple of people, you highlighted those in the executive summary, seem to be against growth, and they referred to how the school district made efforts towards stopping growth instead of growth. And I've heard those same voices when they're talking about referendums. At least in one of these comments where the person said that we shouldn't have to support Pittsburgh schools, there seems to be a misunderstanding perhaps that even though they call it Oregon schools, Pittsburgh also pays just as much in taxes as Pittsburgh is in the village of Oregon. So, any comments on those negative type of feedbacks? Did you see executive summary says very few like that? You perceive that they were speaking for a silent, large population, or were they really small?
Well, all I can really speak to is the people who came to the group. So it's hard to, because this is qualitative information, it's hard to extend dramatically beyond the people who are at the group. It was a handful, I would say, and please, anyone who is there can certainly jump in here. It's a tough thing because I think it came from the feeling that we're growing quickly. We're growing faster than I'd like us to grow, but it is happening. So
Those sessions where those questions were raised were really good informational instructional sessions to talk about the difference between the district and how it relates to the 11 municipalities that comprise the district, or which include the district, and what responsibilities each of us have. And so once those questions were asked and we could explain, we don't deal with the growth issues, the zoning issues, those are all the municipal issues, and they have various reasons for the growth. They understood that when we got into the money talk, and then understood that actually those tax dollars for the growth related to the school district will be coming into the district too. That seemed to resolve a lot of anxiety about growth. I mean, there were a couple of people who are just anti-growth, and we weren't, you're not going to educate them on that. But by and large, when you talked about roles and responsibilities and taxes and how that works, that resolved those questions pretty good, I thought.
yeah, I think that's right on.
Yeah. Anybody over here with questions? No. I thought the ones that I were at were really good and instructional, and people, when you walk them through the facts and gathered the facts, understood the basis for it, and were uniformly understanding of why we're asking the question and why we're contemplating having to build. So I thought it was positive from that standpoint, Tim.
One thing that really struck me was how much conversation there was about all the things that go on around the school. There was less conversation, at least in the group that I was in, there was less conversation about the school day and the school location than what went on before school and after school. From childcare to athletics to busing, things around, and how important it was to those people, at least that I heard in the group, the session that I attended, how important those things were, and that's why they were there.
I think one of the themes as we were walking through it was becoming accustomed to a different looking school district, one whose population base isn't solely centered in the village of Oregon, but is going to have a significant increase in Fitchburg, and realizing that Fitchburg students are Oregon students, just as Brooklyn students are. So that was a good chance to talk about that. Okay. Brian, do you have any other information for us? Thanks, Erica. That was really good. Thanks for spearheading those focus groups for us. They were really well done.
Well, we had a lot of help from a lot of good people. Dr. Bergstrom and Andy was at everyone, so
Yeah.
thank you.
Brian.
Yes, I'll start with a comment. I think everyone is familiar with this old American icon the good old days. We often have fallen in love with the good old days, and sometimes that we forget about what lies ahead or what we currently have. So it's easy to reminisce about what we were, our school configurations, and the fact it comes down to one simple fact. At some point in the district, we're going to have 2,000 more students. And how can we best plan for those 2,000 new students? I also was surprised, but I think we had a really good conversation on Saturday morning when a few individuals asked, if your children are resident in the district but not in the Village of Oregon, do you still pay taxes? And that was an interesting question. I sort of assumed everyone knew the answer to that question is you pay taxes wherever your residence is. So I think we might be answering similar questions a number of times, and again, not a bad thing at all. The one additional document that we have for your consideration is the last document, and Janie, did you hand this? Okay, we did hand this out. Great. These are some growth projection charts. The one chart we didn't include, but if you recall, the first time we reported back to the board, Katie Heights, our district registrar, put together some enrollment data, and one of the questions was, if we were to build a new school, how many students would be in that K-6 elementary school? And what we know, what Katie put together, we had roughly 425 students the day it opens before we see the increased enrollment in the next 2 years. That was just rolling up the students that we currently have, putting them into that K-6 elementary school. Again, wherever we build that K-6 elementary school, really option number, I'll say option number 4. As a follow-up to that, and remember, when we're moving students, similar to what you saw administrators do and Katie do over the last 2 months, as we're attempting to balance class sizes and as we're attempting to balance out enrollments at the various schools. If you look at chart number 1, this was the simplest version, and a question that I believe Steve and a couple of other board members raised. What will it look like with option 3 or option 4 in the 2025 to 2026 school year? As you go down that row, is everyone with me on that page? Okay. As you go down that row, you'll notice Katie just worked it out this way mathematically. It's highly unlikely we'll have 453 students in each one of the schools, but again, just trying to balance it out. For the elementary schools, we would be at about 453 in option 3 or in option 4. And again with Rome Corners. So this gives you a sense of what it would look like in 2025 and 26 school year. Again, our total would be about just under 5,200 students, not including 4K kids.
Brian, I have a question. So in chart 1, the second, third, and fourth column that have yellow, red, and green, that's if we did nothing with the projections moving forward, and then where it says option 3 and option 4 is if we build.
Correct.
Option 3, option 4. Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
And I saw Carrie Majeski somewhere here, and I always feel like I need to give the Carrie Majeski asterisk, which would say, Brian, you're forgetting that Brooklyn is already over capacity now. I should be red instead of yellow. So I share that, and actually that would be the same, although Chris doesn't say it as often to me as Carrie says it to me. I would say it applies to both Brooklyn and Netherwood.
Brian, I've got a question too about, does this option 3 and option 4 correspond with the option C and option D, which would correspond with the option 1B and the option 4 that we saw 2 months ago?
Yes, it does.
So did I get all those right?
You got it
1B
right.
and 4 and C and D and 3 and 4 are all the same?
Correct.
Wow.
I didn't notice that until right now when Katie had used option 3 and option 4. We should have used option C and option D. We'll correct that. And then the second is just a little more detail. She put this together and said, it's a little confusing to me, but I know some people like a lot of additional data, so that's chart number 2, which includes the 2021 and then the 2025 school years just included in that.
If, for the chart 2 and option 3, it shows that we're in yellow for Brooklyn and Prairie, but wouldn't we have converted Rome Corners? And so we'd actually have 4 K-5s at that point in time?
Not in 2020. In 2020,
We would have 3.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the one
So
thing
you're
that
spreading across 3.
Yeah, the one thing that option D does is it preserves RCI for a longer period of time. Everyone follow me on that?
Yeah.
It eventually will change RCI to an elementary school in 2024, but it preserves the status of RCI for an additional 7 years. So those are the additional data. Of course, if you want another slice of data, let us know and we can provide that. And I think the other big takeaway that we had is just as you look at the April 2018, you can already see the trend of increased enrollment in the district. And increased enrollment in the district before some of the significant housing developments come online.
I want to go back to the question that Krista had in 2021 for option 3. Option 3 has RCI moving to a K5 because we're adding a new 6A building. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so
I missed
we
that.
actually have 4 K5s, which would be our current, and then converting Rome Corners, and then we have the current middle school and the high school at 550, okay, which is different than if you move over to option 4 in 2021. We build
I
a new.
don't know if you meant to say this. You said 3 elementary schools in 2021 in option 3. Or you said 4 elementary schools. There's only 3.
No, there are 4.
Oh, she has it identified as intermediate.
Yeah.
Got it.
That one becomes an elementary down there, whereas in option 4, we're just starting with elementary and
Yes.
doing a K6. We have yeah. Okay.
Yes, because if you look at the board, RCI goes to K5 under option C or option 3. Yes. We will relabel this to Rome Corners / elementary / intermediate because it's actually both.
Yeah, because in option 4, we bring online the K6 school and don't have a new middle school at that time. That comes on board in 2025, 26. Okay, good. Any questions about the data that Brian gave? Okay. Erica we had a chart up, at least this was a fairly new chart, but this is the cost of saying no chart, I called it. Yeah, we're going to just put it on the table, actually, in front of the microphone. You know, if we don't do anything this year, the prospect is, as we drive into space, we're going to have to increase class size because we're running out of rooms, move to carts, convert non-classroom areas, or bring in some temporary classrooms, what we call the trailer option. So, I mean, as the longer we go out and the longer we get numbers, those become the costs of saying no options. When we showed that chart to the community members, they didn't like any of the 4 bullet points as options, just as a summary. So, okay. Troy?
I have one question on the cost of not acting this year regarding open enrollment. And this is just a question, certainly not a very popular question, but would there be a situation where we would turn away existing open enroll students per current school district policy?
I think for the first time in a long time, we've frozen at certain levels that we haven't done before. We have really been pretty open in terms of allowing open enrollees in and creating space. This year, I think, and help me, Gina, we've limited this year for the first time in a long time.
We're more limited than we've ever been.
Yeah, just because of a recognition that we don't have space.
We have almost always been limited for the last 6 or 7 years in special education students because of their high-cost needs and the fact that we just couldn't offer the program to them. But this year we've closed, actually for the last couple of years, we've closed down various sections. This year we closed down more sections than before.
I mean, I guess my question is, would we ever get to a point where we're so constricted on space and new houses are being constructed that we would be faced with the possibility of actually turning away a student that's already been an Oregon student for a period of time?
I believe the answer to that question is we cannot do that. Once in, you have the opportunity to finish.
Is that a policy?
That's clearly if they're a resident district student, but if they're an open enroll, that's Gina.
So I would say for current students who we enroll, that we couldn't change the rules for them, but there are some districts that have rules that say you can set rules about when you reapply for open enrollment. So like some districts say you have to apply every time you change a building. So we could do that potentially moving forward, but you wouldn't be able to change the rules retroactively, which is I think what Dr. Bussler was describing.
But it's our
There,
I just want to
so
clarify.
so that would be your decision point. Some points are not.
I think that's correct. So if we have 50 new students from a new neighborhood in Oregon, could we ask 50 students from, I'm just using this as an example, the 50 students we have from Belleville to step back and allow our 50 new students to fill those spaces if we don't move ahead with a new school for a while?
So no, once the way the rules are now, once you're in, you're in. So once there are students, there are students. So you would not be able to you would not be able to change the rules in the middle, would be my best way to
Under our
describe it.
current policy?
Under our current policy. But if you said in the future that you'd have to apply, I'll just say, for example, at every building change, then that rule would only apply to students that were not yet here.
Krista?
I think one thing we have to be careful of, though, is as we look at these sheets, we have capacity at the high school. So it could be not good for our district to view some schools differently. So I would say we need to tread very, very lightly on changing any policy with open enrollment.
Yeah, I'll just restate it. Just a question. I'm not at all considering that as an option, but you know, if space continues to be tight, I think those are some of the things that the board would be forced to have to think about.
And I think we've already done that practically with the latest approval of open enrollment, I think we've practically done what you're suggesting, Tim, is to turn off that pipeline, because if, we can only change the rules on the go forward, and that only makes a difference if we're accepting people in the pipeline, and we're really not to the extent we had in the past, is what I'm hearing, right? What? It was a spigot? Yeah. No, we just...
But it also served a really important purpose during a really difficult budget time. Some of you may not recall that, but it saved the district during a time where things were pretty tight. So.
But it's a good question to ask, because people will ask us that, because we've had that is about open enrollment, and can we somehow reverse that trend, and we really can't. Except on a go-forward basis, and we have. Is, I guess, my elevator speech. Good question. Any other really good questions that are popping out? Any more information, Brian, that you're sharing with us? Are we...
No, but we're going to bring, at the next agenda, or the next board meeting, we're going to ask you to take a look at some open enrollment spaces based on what we know for potential enrollments for this next year. I just want to get that out on the table, not to surprise anyone, and it's at 2 grade levels based on where we're seeing our existing enrollments. But nothing more in terms of the Roffers data that I'll say we've worked backwards into, if you know what I mean.
Okay. We're at 8:30. We had talked about scheduling a special meeting, and we're still trying to figure out a date. We got some options to do that. I think I'm going to go around and ask people where are they at without kind of revealing specifics, but are you feeling that you're ready to make a decision individually on a go-forward basis? Are we close to talking about that tonight? And if so, how would we do that? Because the process would be as if we come to consensus on a couple questions. One is, do the numbers justify building? I think we've already sort of given thumbs up to that before. Do we need to go in November? We've given some preliminary thumbs up to that, but not definitively. And then which one option do we look at? For me, that's the logical progression of how we analyze this. Where are you at? And we'll have to resolve that. If we come to consensus on that and an option, the next step would be that the administrative team would, assuming that is yes, we believe the numbers justify, we need another building, we need to go in November, and this is the option we want. If that's a yes from the board with consensus, they need to pull that information together to work with bonding council to formulate a referendum question that we vote on, that we would submit this for referendum, prove to going referendum, and they got to work with Findorf and Braid to tighten up the costing of that. Okay? And we may need some more information on that. But the sooner we can get to answers on, I think, my 3 questions, do the numbers justify proceeding? Does it mean November, and which option are people looking at? The sooner we can get to a board on resolution, the better off we're going to be, both in terms of framing how that question would look and the dollars with respect to that, and because that's going to impact if we believe we're going out and it's successful, we got to think about design and bid time to get open by 2020. So, yep, go ahead. So
just want to
weigh in on my thinking in terms of process right now.
Okay, I just want to ask a clarifying question or make a clarifying point, which is that in all of the options that we see in front of us, A, B, C, and D, we are talking about a referendum to build in 2020 and a second referendum question that would come at a future date for the bottom half, the 2024 column row, correct?
We're
Just so that
looking at-
everybody knows, we're looking at 2 different questions and talking about different building options and different timing.
Not in terms of the November referendum, there wouldn't be two questions as we anticipated. There would only be one.
Right.
Yeah, it would be, let's just say we pick option, which is 2, which is build a new grade school 4-6 and renovate. That would be the only question that would be out in November of 2018. The 2024 solution, which would be to build a new K-3 elementary school, that would be for a subsequent board to run out.
Right. I guess the reason I'm just asking that be clarified, just so that everyone considers that when they're talking about the options, because sometimes we might make the decision to go with a particular option on the assumption that both will pass. And I think it's important to consider that you might pass one and not the other. So let's just say, for example, you choose option B and we build a new 4-6, but then aren't ever able to pass the second option, which means that we are still with crowding problems down the line. Anyway,
Yep.
I didn't articulate that very well, but I think you all know what I mean.
Yeah, by doing a 2-step process, we're creating greater flexibility and to view where the numbers are coming from to see if we're matching projections, and we have a confidence that they'll be that way, but it creates that flexibility. Okay, but you do create some risk that the climate changes and people aren't going to vote for that. Now we have a crowding issue. Okay, any other kind of thoughts that in terms of our processing? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to kind of walk around to see where you're at. Okay, unless you want me to start. Go ahead.
I'll start. So you're asking us 3 questions.
And we could do the dot exercise.
No.
You know how much I like.
No. Why don't we take it one question at a time and go through everyone?
Yeah. Okay. And the first question in my set is, do the numbers justify the fact that we have to build?
Right. And I'd be happy to start and say yes. I think I would say yes.
I mean, and that question is, do we have any doubt about the numbers or concern about them? So, Troy?
Yes. No more elaboration necessary.
We've all said.
Yep. Barb, Tim, Krista? I'm there too. Okay, so the next thing is when? Okay, and are we sooner rather than later, or are we looking at putting this to the public in November? I'm going to start over this side. Krista?
Yes, I think we're ahead of projections and the numbers show.
I agree.
Okay.
It isn't about right now, it's about when that school opens.
Yeah.
It's going to be predictably overcrowded.
Yep. Dan?
As soon as we can.
Yeah, Troy? Okay, I think we're all on board on that. And I think the reaction was when we talked to people that prospective planning is more economical too, and it's educationally better. They get that. So, okay, we've got consensus as a board that we're comfortable going out to our public in November for a building referendum. Okay, that being said, now we have to look at what option are we looking at as a board. Okay, we can take this in a number of different ways. We can discuss each option and go through that and where we're at, or have people say, what are you thinking of, where you're leaning to, and why? Any thoughts on how to proceed? What? Okay. So I'm just going to go this way. Has anybody got what? I go ask everybody where they're at right now and see where that prompts discussion rather than, I think we've talked about the options and the strengths and weaknesses. I'm kind of interested to see where people are at now. So, Krista.
I think that it's a question of option C or D for me.
And do you have a preference between C or D? Okay, Tim?
I have a preference to option C, period.
I have a preference for C or D, and I'm waiting for somebody here to say something that will help me pick my favorite.
Okay. Courtney?
I have an option for C or a preference for C or D, also based on the feedback that we got from some of the focus groups. I think that was kind of clear as well. And I do not feel ready to make a decision yet. I think I would need more discussion.
I also am in the C or D frame of mind. To me, it's more about available land, I guess. I think option D, with the new K-6 school first, would be more palatable in the northern part of the district, and but the option C with the 6-8 first would be more central located, in my opinion. So,
Dan?
Given the 4 options, and those are the options that we're choosing from, I agree that C and D are the best options. I lean towards D for the, I think the same reason that Troy maybe. I think if we do bifurcate the referenda, we have 2 different referenda at different years, would probably be more likely to pass the second one if we started with option D. But that's just my own intuition on that. In the end, correct me if I'm wrong, but those 2 options are the same, right? We end up with the same configuration, right? Okay.
Yep, and it's just about staging.
Right.
It's a staging. And I'm at C and D too, with a lean towards C, but I'm willing to listen to the D proponents in terms of where we're at. So A and B are off the table, okay? And we're going to focus on C and D. What type of things do people need to make a decision between those 2? Anything we can get you, or do you want to wait a little bit and stop tonight and move? Well, Chris has got to leave at 8:45, so I don't want to, or 9, so I don't want to rush the conversation. Okay.
I think I heard it mentioned, and I would concur that it would be helpful to know what some of our land purchase options are. And I know that that has been in process and is still in process. So I think there might be some benefit to waiting a few weeks till that becomes clearer. Because I think it will become clearer in the coming weeks.
Okay. I think that's probably wise, and I'm sensing from the board that now that we've got 2, we can delve in a little bit and look at kind of the determining factors. I think land and the staging is really an important one. So let's take a break, a pause as a board. We've made some pretty significant headway in terms of where we're at, and we're looking at C and D, and we've got to work at getting a date with that. So I will work with Janie tonight and tomorrow to get something out to you on that. Okay? Do you want, is that information we can talk about tonight, or we should share it personally? Okay. Let me work with Janie, and you might get something yet tonight, okay? So to be able to schedule that. We've got some things in play. Everybody good with this? Okay, in a good spot. Take a look at C and D and those options, and then we'll proceed at our meeting to do that. I think what we'll do is have probably a closed session before that. Go into closed session to look at the building options and discuss that. Yeah, I'm sorry, the land location, see where we're at to see if that informs us, and go from there. Okay? Good. Brian, anything that Anything you need from feedback from us on it? Are we in a good place from your standpoint?
Yes, we are in a really good place, and I do agree that we should start that with a closed session, because I have some information that I can't share in open session tonight, and I will also be gathering some new information relative to land acquisition. And the last point, I think I would like to have Findorf, representatives from Findorf and Bray at the meeting, just so they could help respond to any questions. I think Matt Wolford is invaluable in these kinds of conversations from an architectural standpoint. And if you have a costing question, I think it would be great to have Findorf there too. And I've had some preliminary conversations that we were going to get together for a meeting, and of course they would like to be here as well. I would say in the meantime, if there's information that, first of all, we're not going to use option 3 or 4. We're going to call it option C and D. So we're always on the same page. Secondarily, if there are questions that you have for Steve or on the whole process, I'd suggest route them to Steve. Steve and I will have a conversation, and we want to fill your palate with as much information as we can as you process through that. So this is very helpful to us, because one of the things that, again, not to get too ahead of the process, but one of the things that we want to tie together this summer is to do some preliminary design work, because being able to meet that September 2020 timeline requires us to be ready to bid, again, assuming everything is favorable, in January, February of this next year. And I don't say that to put pressure on anybody. That's the nature of school construction. There is pressure on everyone, to make a decision and to get us moving forward. So this was very productive tonight.
Great. And
Thank you.
I'd just like to emphasize that, we're almost near final decision on this, but it's a process that's taken almost 2 years from starting contemplation, the code task force, the task force work, and then all the sources of feedback that we've received as a board, from our administrative team to the OEA, to the leadership teams, to the focus groups, and the mounds of data that we've got. It's been an incredibly data-driven process, and one that's been part of a feedback loop that's included everybody. So I think one more meeting and we'll be ready to make final decision. Okay, let's go on with our agenda. That's information items F. Brian, both of these are yours.
The first information item, and this will be really fast, our last day of school is Tuesday, June 5th. We have communicated that to parents, I think, the same day of our last board meeting, but I just wanted to highlight that so everyone knew our final day. We only had one snow day this year. It's too late to have a snow day now, so we're not going to have it.
Don't say that. Don't be saying that.
Oh, come on, we like risk. Next item is superintendent's report, and I believe you're aware of this, but I just want to underscore, on April 24th, the Wisconsin Association for Environmental Education recognized Brooklyn Elementary School and the Oregon Middle School as Green Ribbon honorees for the state of Wisconsin, and we are participating in a national recognition award process now, and we'll hear very soon on that. So I thought everyone would like that, because that has been one of our long-standing priorities. When we were meeting last week on Monday evening, right in this very room, May 7th is our youth apprentice reception program. I know you're very familiar with our youth apprenticeship programs, which are very strong by Dane County standards, and I'd say by Midwest standards as well. We have approximately 50 students, and our recognition, we recognize 280 students across Dane County. And if you haven't, I usually make it there, but I was here with all of you last week, and it is a really, really great program, and I will make sure to get next year's program on the agenda for you. I'm a little boring with the next item. I am always so happy when prom is over, because I'm a huge fan of a safe and uneventful prom. And from everything that I've heard or haven't heard, we once again had a safe and uneventful prom. So congratulations to our kids and parents that made that all happen, and we very much enjoy hosting prom. I always feel better on Sunday morning when prom is all settled down and we're moving on to the next item. Wednesday night, we have our high school senior honors night. If you haven't attended one of those programs in the past, please get that on your calendar in the future. It starts at 7 o'clock in the PAC, and we will recognize our terrific high school students. Another item for your calendar is our retirement recognition, which will be in the Innovation Center on Wednesday, May 30th. And Janie, I believe it runs from 3:30 to 6, and our program is at 4:30? Okay. I know we've sent you something. We will send you some more reminders on that as well. And then one of the culminating events in the district, and I say one of the culminating events, is June 10th at 1 p.m. in our Oregon High School graduation. Again, if you haven't had an opportunity to participate in that, I would highly recommend it. I guarantee beautiful weather because we're holding it inside. And backed by popular demand, we receive such positive feedback about being inside, and it does make our lives just a little bit easier because we're not worrying about a rainstorm or a thunderstorm or some sort of event.
Let Janie know if you are going to attend. Okay.
And then my last item, we were at Lerner Park today. It was the Lerner Park Field Day for our 8th grade science class. The investment that we made in the greenhouses, we could see that investment because we grew all the perennial flowers, and they are sitting in their new home at Lerner Park. We had to make a few adjustments on the fly today because there was a substantial amount of water in some of the Lerner Park areas. When I stopped home quickly to pick up a few things for my meeting, or for the meeting tonight, my wife said to me, "You sort of smell like a swamp." I did have a different pair of shoes and a different pair of socks, but those of us that were outside, we were in swamp-like conditions, but our middle school kids are terrific, and they had a great day. And you might remember when you had middle school children that it's a flipped day. The AM kids go to Lerner Park, and the PM kids come to the high school, and then in the afternoon it flips, and the students that were at Lerner Park came to the high school for an orientation program. So that's a big event in the life of our 8th graders, and I am so happy we did not have rain or lightning or thunderstorms or crazy stuff. So with that, I will stop unless any of you have a question or questions for me. You are all welcome if you would ever like to come to Lerner Park too. It's amazing when we look back, this was the 17th year, and while I haven't been there for 17 years, I can reflect on where we had pulled honeysuckle. It seems like you're not making progress, but we actually are making progress because we plant areas that we've removed honeysuckle, and it was a good day.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Future agenda, 2 things is I think we're narrowing down a date for a special meeting, but our June 11th meeting, you have a draft of an agenda for that meeting. That would, Brian foreshadowed discussion on open enrollment spaces. We have to do our annual adjustment to the budget to reflect actuals, requirement that we do that. A graduation report, and then a carryover from our workshop of last week, and have a in-depth conversation on equity. Okay, so anybody have any other agenda items? If anything comes up, let Brian or me know. We're looking at, Janie gave me the dates that we're looking at as potential for our discussion on our decision-making on C or D, and we're looking at Tuesday, May 29th. Can everybody confirm that we can make it? That would mean we'd move an expulsion to the 22nd, right? Okay. If anybody cannot make the 29th, let me know now if you can. Because it's really critical that all of us are here.
What time?
That's flexible. So I think we'd probably start at 6:30.
We had a meeting on the 22nd.
The 22nd would be an expulsion hearing, so we would need 4 for that.
Is this, was this the Google poll that you sent out today?
No, that was Riverwalk.
Okay.
So, okay. I'm good for the, thumbs up for the expulsion, we just, okay. So, okay. We got a quorum for that, and then the 29th, everybody's good for the 29th, tentatively scheduled for 6:30, if that works. Unless, for convenience of Matt or those guys who are traveling, we could maybe bump it to 6.
If you could make 6, that would even be better.
Okay. May 29th, then we'll have our meeting. The only agenda item, well, there'll be 2 agenda items. One will be a closed session to talk about land issues, and then we'll come out of a closed session and discuss options C or D with the desire that we would select one of those. Do you know, are you going to be able, depending on which one we choose, to have language for us to vote on? Or do you need us to get to one and then do language?
We need to get to one and then do language. Andy and I have had a brief conversation about how we would frame the language, but we haven't really, we don't have anything back from Brian.
So then we would
Lancet
need,
yet.
we would need that on, put that on for June 11th. Then
Yes.
would be the decision-making time C or D is on the 29th. You're going to take that information with the referendum approval language on the 11th.
Correct.
Okay, good.
So the 29th will be where?
Here. Assuming we can get the room. We'll check. Okay. Good question. We just sort of like, oh yeah, we can get it.
We know Jim Pliner.
Okay. Good. All right, that takes us to checkout. Nothing? You're going to say nothing, right? Yeah. Courtney, Troy, Dan? I don't have anything either. It was a really good meeting. Ellen? Yes, you do. You get the last word.
Oh, okay. Well, you guys are all invited to my grad party. It's June 9th, 10:30 to 2:30. It's brunch.
That's
and
PM, right? 10:30 to
AM.
2:30
Oh,
AM?
sure.
Right,
I
okay.
mean, if you want to stay that long.
Right.
I mean, I might not be around that long. I'm going to have a donut wall. I'm just saying, so. But you
donut
guys just
wall?
come and stop by and say hi. You guys are welcome.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
You realize it's on TV, right?
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Okay, you've heard it. Ellen has invited the entire Oregon School District to her donut wall. Yeah, yeah. First come, first serve, right? Okay, great. We'd like you to do the motion to adjourn, but you can't, so that's been our tradition. I'd entertain that motion, however.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed. Thanks, everyone. See you on the 22nd and then the 29th. And then at graduation and then the 11th.